A late addition to NC State's 2025 class has been added, and does it potentially mark a change in philosophy?
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our Tuesday show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms, as always, apply. Happy Tuesday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Kenton, on Monday, NC State football picked up a very late addition to the 2025 recruitment cycle. EDGE Adrian Farrow out of the state of Florida. He was a former commit to Florida Atlantic, so this is a flip situation from FAU to NC State. Although it is relatively late in the cycle for high school kids, it also shows me where the priority is for NC State. They still need to stock up on that D-line.
Yeah, and Adrian Farrow is a guy that, I mean, obviously you and I aren't expecting him to be playing right away on this defensive line, but he could be a good depth piece. And who knows? We've been shocked before by guys like an Arius Moore who came on super late in his recruiting class. And you know, I was there real time in person to see him show up and show out from day one in camp and earn his way into some playing time. So, you know, Adrian Farrow could definitely be one of those guys. I'm very interested in seeing how things are developing in terms of high school recruiting, because it seems like we're seeing more one-offs and more he's committed, but he won't sign. Looking at you, Contrell Reinhardt, and things along those lines where it's like, what's really going on? What's happening behind the scenes here? But again, I think that Adrian Farrow is a hell of a ball player, and I think he'll be a great addition to this team. Now, in terms of the X's and O's of what he brings and whatnot, I have only read scouting reports. I have not watched a ton of film on him yet. But from what everybody says, he's a big body, but he's twitchy. He's very, very twitchy. He can stand to put on weight and all that good stuff. Again, from what people say, I've got to watch the film myself. I still have not yet, but I truly hope he's an impactful edge for the Wolfpack in the future.
One thing that does jump off the page, at least for me, is his size. I've seen some conflicting measurements, but I've seen 6'3", I've seen 6'4", I've seen 240, I've seen 250. This is a big-bodied edge, and that's certainly something that Coach Thunder can work with once you get him in the lab. But three-star edge out of the state of Florida. He had a pretty impressive offer list. He also had offers from the likes of Georgia Tech, Indiana, Marshall, Maryland, Mississippi State, and Pitt, just to name a couple of those. But Kenton, I want to talk about a potential philosophy shift. Tony Gibson had a prototypical type of lineman he likes in his 3-3-5 system. Being that now we have DJ Eliot at the helm, do you think that'll change the type of body type they're looking for in D linemen?
I mean, potentially, but not a ton. Obviously, the scheme difference requires different things, right? Like, even if you look at a Davin Van, he's a guy very compact for an edge. He's not as long and lanky as you would think of when you think of a edge rusher in today's game for the most part. But I'm not expecting a complete and total 180 from the guys that we had in the past, because, I mean, objectively speaking, most of them are what edges look like for the most part. Again, could you see thinner guys now that we're running a little bit more of a traditional scheme? Absolutely. You could absolutely see that. But I'm not really expecting, you know, us to all of a sudden start to get those guys that are wide receiver / DN / tight end that, oh, yeah, you do a million things. We're expecting you to play DN at a high level now that, you know, DJ Eliot is at the helm instead of Tony Gibson.
Something else I want to talk about on here, and I've already kind of poked at it, but NC State finding another edge kind of this late in the cycle, to me, that would emphasize that they're still making a priority and adding depth to the defensive line. Now, like Kenton's already said, do we expect Adrian Farrow to make an impact this season? Very likely not, especially being the fact that he'll be joining the Wolfpack probably very late in the summer after he gets out of actual high school, because he will not be an early enrollee. But they're still looking for depth, even this late in the game. If you're still adding players to the current year class, once you're getting into February and there on out, you are in the weeds. You're looking high and low for anything you can add depth-wise, and it certainly feels like they're still honing in on defensive linemen / linebacking position. This edge is a little bit of a hybrid spot. So, Kenton, do you think this addition kind of infers that they're still a little bit uneasy about the depth in either one of those spots?
I wouldn't say that this addition confirms that they're uneasy about it, but I will say it shows an investment in that position for the future.
Right.
Even if you feel good about it, if you have additional scholarships, why would you leave them on the table?
Yep.
Why would you say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we've got extra scholarships, but let's give them to a walk-on that we know is never going to play other than a feel-good story. No offense to walk-ons. I played with some that were, they were damn good players, but you get the point. As opposed to saying, you know what? This guy could potentially be a ball player. Why leave anything in the clip? Why leave anything in the chamber if you are Doran and you are doing everything you can to, realistically, I hate to say it, basically coaching for your job here. You don't want to walk out saying, man, if only I would have had one more edge rusher. Man, if only I would have had one more of this or one more of that. Go out there, give everything you got. And again, even if Doran was in a position where it was like, hey, he's won multiple ACC championships, he's a lifer, all that good stuff. He's got a statue built and it's going to be renamed Dave Doran Field. You still would be looking at a situation of why leave scholarships on the table. So I don't think that this confirms a worry more so than it says that we are making a concerted effort to have this look a certain way in the future.
And then I guess last point, it's on the same note. What would you say your biggest concern is when you're talking about the defensive line moving into this year?
I think it's 1,000% the depth and whichever defensive tackle position that Brandon Cleveland is not playing. I pick him as more of a 3 technique, but if he does play the 1, I want to know what our 1 technique looks like, I guess, do we have a high-end pass rusher on the exterior? Do we have an edge rusher that's like, hey, he gonna put the fear of God in you? You got to shift some protections his way or anything like that, because defense at its core is about changing the math equation, right? When you defeat a block as a defender, what happens is the math just went from 1 to 1 to 1 for 0. Like that one guy is now wasted because you are free. You have beat the block. Or if you're fighting off a double team, even if you stalemate a double team, the defense has won because you just went 2 for 1. In pass rush situations, offenses are naturally going to be at an advantage. Nobody plays 5-man fronts as their base anymore for the most part. So you're looking at 4-on-5 being your de facto situation in any 4-man front for a passing game. So how do you change that math? Davin Van was a math changer. You had to account for him. You had to slide to him. You had to have somebody over there or else it was good as cooked. How do you change that math as an edge rusher? If you do not, you're working in a situation where quarterbacks will have all day tomorrow to get rid of the ball.
That's far and away my biggest point of emphasis. We know relatively who the starters will be, who the main contributors will be, but who's going to be the guy or guys? We know Brandon Cleveland had a spectacular year. He will be a force on the interior of that line, but now that David Van is moving on, Trevally Price and probably Isaiah Shirley will occupy the edges. Can they be effective or nearly as effective as Davin Van was? I think that's a massive question. And we talked about this weeks ago. With Davin Van moving on, kind of gives you the wonder on how effective they will be. Getting into the backfield, forcing pressure on the quarterback. We've had the luxury the last couple of years knowing, okay, we got Davin Van coming back. We know we're going to be able to force problems for the offense, or Savion Jackson, CJ Clark, fill in the blank. We've had a steady flow of guys you know you can rely on to blow up a backfield. I don't know if you can say the quite same thing this season. I think outside of Brandon Cleveland, who are the guys that are going to wreak havoc in the backfield? It might be Trevally Price. He's had solid seasons with the Pack, but he's probably going to have to take it up a couple notches if we are going to see consistent pressure on getting into the backfield. So the emphasis on the D-line and also the linebacking play is certainly something to keep your eye on here moving forward as you get even deeper into this cycle. Obviously, spring ball is just merely weeks away. I believe that calendar will flip as soon as you get to March, and then you have the spring game coming up in the early parts of April. But the coaching staff possibly showing a little bit of the deck, adding some more depth here. 2025 Edge Adrian Farrow flips his commitment from FAU to the pack. Certainly more than excited to have him running with us. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Mike James' status on the hard court. Kevin Keats provided a small update on Monday. More on this after a quick word from our sponsors. Our Tuesday sponsor is Gametime. Are you looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sporting event, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a little bit of a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been made easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all of the hard work for you. It creates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of ticket listings. I personally have recently grabbed a deal using their super deal on the app for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value once I was sitting down. It was truly a steal. The seat view feature in the app is also a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what to expect upon arrival. It's very reassuring. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Are you ready to make your event even better than ever before? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, and again, that's redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Middle portion of our Tuesday show, now switching gears and going on to the hard court. Coach Keats provided a small update on Monday in the health of Mike James, obviously the Louisville transfer guard that has not been able to see the floor so far this year for NC State. He had a knee scope right before the season began. And every time we had heard an update previous to the one we got on Monday, it was always 2 more weeks, or it's always 3 more weeks, or it's always next month, or we're expecting him potentially by the Kansas game. And there was always additional time each time that new update had come. And now we're sitting here in the beginning of February. Coach Keats on Monday provided another update, and essentially the update was he still doesn't quite know about the status of Mike James. He also added that Mike James has very obviously been frustrated. He's had several setbacks with his knee, and they had obviously anticipated him coming back earlier than any time the rest of the season now. But Kenton, my question to you, as you're looking at the rest of this season, which is very likely going to be, 3 to 4 more weeks, would the juice be worth the squeeze? Does NC State bother with bringing him back at potentially not 100%, knowing that, your tournament hopes are on the brink?
No, don't piss me off, man. Don't. Why? Okay, let's look at this from the smartest standpoint possible. Grayson, what's the best case scenario with absolute best case? Like, this is a success for Mike James coming back for the rest of the season. What does that look like to you?
A success? You probably have to win out, which again, very unlikely to happen.
So if the only way to success is winning out, which is unlikely to happen, right, for you, to me, I think success for him would be him contributing solid minutes, maybe averaging like 8, 2 and 2 on solid minutes, good defense. I think that's a lot. That's a lot, right? With that in mind, I think that maybe is enough to get you into the ACC tournament. Maybe it's not. Why would you waste a year if you could potentially petition the ACC or the NCAA rather for, hey, this young man deserves another year. He clearly could not play woo-doo. This is what happened. He did not play at all this season. These are problems that we've seen under Keats for some time. Another potential none and done guy. Because if he decides to hit the portal at the end of the season, he'll have collected checks from the Wolfpack. He'll have been on scholarship for the Wolfpack. Will not have played for the Wolfpack, a la a ton of guys in the past, or really a ton of guys including the commits. But even if you don't include the commits, even if you just include the guys who have been on the roster, there are still too many of those looking at you, Isaiah Miranda and MJ Rice and company, where it's like they were here, and then maybe we had a game where we got super excited about them, MJ Rice and Reynolds, or we had moments where we were like, oh, this kid could do something. Isaiah Miranda showing out in the pregame layup line, and then it was nothing ever materialized from it. So, honestly, I'm at the point where, and I know that this may sound bleak and this may sound bad, I don't give a damn about the labor pain. Show me the baby. If he can't get the job done, if he can't play this year, don't. It's clear at this point in time, if you believe in your heart of hearts that this team could turn around, and that's me looking from the outside in. Of course, with Keats having coached what he did last year and you know, having an argument of all we got to do is get in, sure. I mean, from that standpoint, sure. But again, the probability of statistics and logic is saying, shut it down. Just shut it down.
I guess, yeah, when you have accomplished the impossible, nothing else will ever seem impossible after that. But if I'm going to put myself in the shoes of Mike James here, and knowing I'll probably not be 100%, if I do choose to come back, and Keats had also noted that they're likely a week away-ish from having to basically make their final decision here, knowing that you'll only play roughly, 2 to 3 more weeks of the season, you're fighting to get out of the basement of the ACC, you're second to last currently, is that worth burning a potential red shirt? Because he has already used a medical red shirt once. He spent 3 years at Louisville. His very first year, he had a torn Achilles and did not play at all. So he's already used a medical red shirt. Now, I guess I'd have to double check on this. If you've used a medical red shirt, don't you still have a non-medical red shirt to use if you so choose?
Yeah,
so
you do. So he can use a regular red shirt this year if he used a medical, or if that first one was a regular, he could use a medical here.
So that's my point. Is it worth burning a potential red shirt when you've already missed 75% of the season and your team is sitting there in the cellar of the ACC? If Mike is looking out for Mike, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze here. I think I would rather get back to 100%, whether that's at NC State next season or if he chooses to enter the portal, I guess it is what it is. I don't know if it's worth him coming back if we don't even know if the product on the court would even change that much. He's been out of the rotation, obviously, the entire season. That takes a long time, especially in these Keats teams that we've seen the last couple of years. It takes a long time to find an effective rotation. In fact, we still haven't found one for this season. So that's another problem to be baked into the equation here. Would Mike James coming back solve everything? No, certainly not. There's still a multitude of issues plaguing this team that even if he does come back, would we be a better version of our current selves? Maybe, but that's the unknown. So there's a lot of different angles to attack this problem here. But me personally, if I am Mike James, I think I'd focus 100% on getting back to 100%, and I'd use a red shirt this year if it were me.
Well, I think that the outlook that it's only a selfish move to use the red shirt, not you looking out for the team, is something I would vehemently disagree with, because you also have the flip side of that and say, you know what, this year feels like a bit of a wash anyway.
Right.
I want to get back for this team, and I want to go through camp with this team. I want to go through an offseason with this team. I want to be there every single day, running every single set, doing everything with this team so that there are no mismatches in chemistry, so that there's no I'm an invasive species taking up air and sucking up shots that were previously able to be taken by other guys. This is a situation where even for the team, I'm not sure if it makes a ton of sense at this point in time. So, I don't think it's whether or not it's selfish or whether or not it's a team guy. I think it's just a personal choice between him, the medical staff, and the coaches about what makes sense and what doesn't based on this team's overall goals.
Right. And as I noted, Keith said that they're likely a week away from having a final decision made. We'll certainly keep our ear to the ground on if that changes between now and then. But very unfortunate situation for Mike James. Obviously, he's been wanting to play, several setbacks with that knee, and that's tough. You can't afford to go out there when you're not 100% and risk further injury. So very frustrating for Mike James, I'm sure. It's also frustrating for the team, being that they probably relied a lot on his contributions this year, and perhaps they do look entirely different. Nonetheless, a hard decision is on the horizon for Mike James and for NC State men's basketball, but at least the decision is one we'll finally hear about. This whole season, and to Kenton's point, there's seemingly always at least one player every year that it's kind of in the clouds. You don't know if he's going to play, when he's going to play, how many games he's going to play in. It's a very unfortunate feature of the Keats tenure here, but certainly looking for more answers for Mike James here within the next week or so. Coming up next, we're going to round out our Tuesday episode with Josh Pate's stab on potential future conference realignment. More on this after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple minutes of our Tuesday show. Wanted to talk a little bit more conference realignment here. Now, obviously, we know that the ACC and ESPN extended their deal for the TV rights through 2036. Spoke about that at the end of last week. Josh Pate, who's a great college football follow all over social media, on Monday, he posted his take on if he had control over conference realignment. He broke it into what feels like sectors instead of conferences. It's very regionally based, and personally, I think some of it makes a lot of sense, but I'll bring this here up on the screen. So as you see here, he's broken this into different conferences, quote unquote. You have the SEC, you have the Big Ten, you break back into a Big East that would become a power conference again. Also the Southwest, the reemergence of a Southwest conference that once stood for a long time, several decades ago. You see the Big 8, which is a smaller version of the Big 12. You also see the Pac-10, the ACC, and then 4 independent schools at the bottom of your screen here. Kenton, what's the most intriguing of these new conferences to you?
First of all, Pate, you're not slick. This is just what college football was in like the 70s and all that. Like, this is literally, you are not slick. We could have Brett Freeland on the show who could confirm. This is almost identical to what it was in the past. The Southwest Conference, which is mostly or not, it's a vast majority of Texas teams, and you throw Oklahoma and Arkansas in there. That's not new. That's not something innovative. That's something that's existed for forever and a day. Now, of all of these, which is the most interesting to me, I am supposed to say the ACC. I really am supposed to give that answer. However, the group that is the Big East, what an interesting group. What an interesting UCF, who when they're playing their highest football, virtually nobody can beat them outside of top tier Power 4 teams. A Louisville team that always seems to be right there on the cusp. Obviously, Virginia Tech leaving the ACC would be them returning back to really most of these teams returning back to the Big East in terms of BC, Pitt, Louisville, Rutgers, Syracuse, all that. It would very much so be just a return to tradition. But I think that they're a group that any year they could have 6 really good teams or 8, 9, 10 really bad ones. You never really know what you would get out of that Big East, as opposed to an ACC where for the most part, when you're looking at a conference with Clemson and Florida State and Miami, that generally somebody out of that group is going to be good.
So obviously I will talk about the ACC here, and Kenton just spoke about the Big East. This proposed Big East is comprised of nearly half of former ACC teams, if it were to take. Obviously, a Boston College, Pitt, Louisville, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech all leaving the ACC to go back into the Big East, which means the ACC kind of gets back to their roots. You see Miami, Florida State, NC State, the Dirty Foot Club, Clemson, Wake Forest, Duke, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and is that a red M, the last block there? Is that Maryland? Never mind. I hate this idea. Get Maryland up out of here. But no, this is interesting because it does place a premium on that regionality and tradition also. Pate also added to this saying that he would like each conference to be about 10 teams and they would play a round robin. So you would lose out on, I guess, non-conference games or the cupcakes, so to speak, and you would essentially just play all the other teams within your conference. What do you make of that idea, Kenton?
I like it. I like getting rid of playing a team that I don't like money games. I don't like them. I can't stand them. Paying somebody to come get their brains beat in is never a thing that I don't feel gross about. I mean, compete, show up and play teams that could be competitive with you. So I'd love the idea of round robin and maybe throw in 2 to 3 games against other power. I guess this would be a power 8 or so team. So I'd love that idea.
And then last point, I think we talked about the Chip Kelly model probably about a year ago. He was heavy on promotion and a relegation system, kind of similar to what you see in European soccer. I think that would get very interesting. However, my last point on this proposal here what do you do in terms of a 12-team college football playoff? Or perhaps it would have to get expanded, because how do you guarantee at-large or even automatic bids if you now have 7 conferences and then you have 4 different independents at the bottom? You see Notre Dame, BYU, Northwestern, and Vanderbilt. I don't quite know how a 12-team college football playoff would still be feasible if this were the case.
Oh, absolutely. And mind you, all of the perfect CFB conferences that he put up completely, and when I say completely, it neglects the group of 5 in a way that none of them are on here.
Oh, for sure.
None of them, right? You go undefeated at Western Michigan, good for you, bro. You're now a FCS team, So, I mean, yes, this isn't necessarily feasible for multiple reasons. Of course, the TV money, there's way too much TV money at this point to do any rearranging and moving of teams in a meaningful way like this. And even beyond that, you're looking at, again, what do you do with the group of 5? What do you do? Because if you're to say, hey, every conference champion gets a at-large or gets a bid to the college football playoff, well, now you've got 7 plus 5, that's 12. Are you doing strictly that so only the champions get in? Because then there's going to be the argument, Ohio State won the first ever 12-team playoff and they didn't play in their conference championship. So where do you go? What do you say? So, I mean, obviously, again, me personally, Josh Pate, you're not slick. You generated a lot of clicks by saying, what did college football look like in the 70s? Bring that back. bring that thing back, and we'll work it out from there.
He certainly got me. I've always valued the regionality and the tradition of the former ACC. I'm not such a fan of SMU and Cal and Stanford getting in here. I understand there's larger things at play, and by that I mean money. But I miss the days of, I hate Maryland, but sometimes I miss seeing Maryland, the old ACC. I would like to get back to those type of days for this conference, and certainly the other conferences as well. I think Texas and Oklahoma moving to the SEC, I mean, whatever. We all know it's about money. It always has been. But I am a fan, at the very least, of the regionality of this proposal from Josh Pate. Feel free to tell us your thoughts. Also, tell us your thoughts on new 2025 commitment EDGE Adrian Farrow out of the state of Florida, a flip from FAU to the Wolfpack late in the cycle, but perhaps can add some very valuable depth. And also tell us what you think about the status of Mike James for NC State men's basketball. Is the juice worth the squeeze, bringing him back for probably the last 2 to 3 weeks of the season? Let us know what you think in the comments. Mash that subscribe button, mash that like button if you have not already. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Wednesday for more. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.